Hey, hello and welcome. I'm Scott Abel, and this is the Content Advantage, a talk show about content for content professionals. I'll be your host and moderator today, and my guest is Ed Perez, formerly a senior technical illustrator at BAE Systems. Ed, welcome to the show.
Good morning, and thank you. Been looking forward to this.
Excellent. Thanks for joining us. I appreciate you making time. And before we get started, let me tell the audience a few things just about today's show. So first, let me tell you that today's show is being recorded, which means at any time, if you need to leave the show a little bit early, don't worry about it. You can come back later using the same URL that you're using to watch today's live show. You can use to watch a recording that you can watch on demand. You can even share it with other people if you'd like them to see the show. And we encourage you to do so. Also, we don't have access to your camera or microphone, so you don't have to worry about us being able to see or hear you. Which some people are concerned about, so don't fret about that. Also, you can ask a question of Ed at any time during the show by clicking the Ask a Question tab located underneath your webinar viewing panel. That'll open up a little text-based window that will allow you to text a question into me. I will queue them up and ask Ed as many as possible with the time remaining during the show. Please know that we cannot text you back, and so we're not being rude if you don't get a response. It's just simply a one-way communication channel. And also, there's some additional information in the attachments section, also located underneath your webinar viewing panel. Clicking that button will open up a little document repository into which you can find information about our guest speaker today. Also, some information about how to suggest a guest on the upcoming show. There's some troubleshooting information in case you have any audio or video challenges on BrightTalk. And there's some information from our sponsors, Zoom In Software, who we'll learn a little bit more about later in today's show. All right, Ed, so thanks for joining us. Tell the audience briefly a little bit about yourself and your recent career change and your connection to the technical illustration discipline.
So I've been a technical illustrator for more than 20 years. First of all, it's something that I love to do. As a child, I loved taking things apart and see how they work and so forth. So this was a natural fit for me as far as a career change or direction. It's just fascinating to me. For example, that phone back there, which is an old one from the late 1940s. I've taken it apart. I've fixed it, and it's just fascinating how things work. That's taken me from one position to another over the years, learning, absorbing, just seeing how the industry works, where it comes from, what it's made of, where it's going. And it's just a fascinating field. I've been involved with both technical illustration and patent illustration, which is another field that we'll talk about in a little bit.
Excellent. In the background, you did notice, I'll put you back on full screen so you can show the point over to the audience members who might not have seen that phone in the background. Does that phone work? Are you able to make that phone call?
It does. And I was talking to Trey about it a little bit. It's got an old capacitor in it that needs to be updated, and I'm going to be sending it away to have it fixed. But that thing weighs a ton. Alfred Hitchcock, there's a movie, Murder by Dial O for Murder or something to that effect.
Yes.
That phone was in. So my wife and I have a house filled with antiquities, and we're curators of sorts because we love the older things and the quality and how well things were made and so forth.
Excellent. Well, tell us a little bit about what at its heart is a technical illustration exactly in your mind.
So a technical illustrator specifically is about educating a maintainer or a mechanic as to how to take something apart and put it back together again. Quite a few of us have worked on cars, and we go and buy a Chilton's manual or the other one I don't remember the name of, but we go through the pages and look at the pictures and so forth, and the pictures never quite match what we need, but we had 75% of the information. So technical illustration is the line work or vector compilation of drawings of how to take a tire apart, how to change brakes on a car, on an airplane, how to fix a refrigerator. When you buy a car, when you get a refrigerator, you get a little manual. So that little manual is a compilation of instructions, just bare bones. I'm going to give you exactly what you need. The drawings are, black ink, some gray sometimes in there and so forth to distinguish between one thing or another, but just the logical information that you need in order to, get that screw out, which is behind this panel, and you got to remove this and this and that in order to get to it. So in essence, that's what it is.
Great. And briefly, you were working with a company called BAE Systems. Would you tell our audience a little bit about what they do and what you were drawing for them?
So BAE Systems is a global company. They're involved primarily in military, although there are many other industries and so forth. I was involved in illustrating parts for the F-35, the fighter jet. So basically, take everything apart and how to safely show a mechanic, a maintainer, how to remove the hydraulic line from the, brake system on the front, the left landing gear and so forth. It gets pretty complicated, it gets pretty involved. There's a lot of safety requirements, do's and don'ts that have to be taken into account because of all the dangers that are involved with the types of liquids that are used and so forth. And it's a very involved field. But if you like taking things apart, then it's something you never quite leave your job. Even when you sign off for the day, you're still thinking about it. How am I going to do this? What angle am I going to show it? And it's an evolving, ever-growing way to simplify. I should be able to do a drawing and give it to a 5-year-old and let them, take apart the front tire in a car just by pictures. So in essence.
Well, yeah, and we all know it doesn't always turn out that way. I think there's all kinds of technical illustrations, right? From very simple ones, from products that maybe like an ink pen that only have 1 or 2 pieces or 3, components that are functional, to a really complicated system like a power plant or an airplane or some other kind of device, as you say, that might kill you, something that could damage you. You want to make sure that the illustration is accurate, right?
Like the ejection seat, for example.
Yes.
I mean,
I want to know how to use that correctly and how to.
It's a rocket, so you need very highly skilled, certified people before you even touch the thing.
Sure.
And the illustrator has to learn what to do, what not to do, because someone's life depends on it. So it's a very serious, life-threatening set of instructions that you.
Could you show us a couple examples of commonly created types of illustrations, and just talk briefly about what they are and why a company might use them?
Let me share a screen.
Sure. I think you've got the capability right there now. Yeah, there you go.
Okay, and let me hit Control L so you can see the whole thing. Okay, so
right.
let me jump to this one. So this one is BE Aerospace. This is for commercial use. It's the base for just an airplane seat. This happens to be for a high-end airplane seat that just it's got heaters on it and massage. This was for Qantas, actually, but this came from a model which I grabbed and rotated in a specific way because, for example, you might want to, and there's two detail boxes on this, H and J, which are depicted on a later and in the CMM or component maintenance manual. So we focus in on that. So this is actually a creation of mine. How do I get the reader to focus in on just the H drawing, which is coming up? So all of the numbers on here are depicted or are linked to a BOM, a bill of materials, which then tells you what number 22 is, what number 8 is, and so forth. So again, this is a very drastic drill down set of pictures and instructions to get a mechanic or maintainer to.
And Ed, did they give you one of these? Did they give you, they go, here, Ed, this is what we want you to draw. Here's the model that we've made of the physical item that we plan to produce. And
there are times when, yeah, you're actually working from the product, but that's becoming more and more rare. So this came from a CAD model, which was provided to me. I cleaned it up, removed stuff, everything that you don't want, and then added what I wanted, and then eventually turned it into a vector graphic, which is what this is. Vector meaning lines, you know, it has a beginning and an end, it has math to it. And you're able to grab this image, typically a CGM, computer graphics metadata, and are able to then utilize or repurpose this drawing in many, many other documents.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. And can you help our audience members who might not know what a CAD model is?
So a CAD model, for example, take a Tesla car and you've got your screen on top. You might see an image of a car. So that image came from, so you have a design engineer that will create an actual mathematical representation, one-to-one, of a refrigerator or a car or a rocket, whatever it might be. And you're able to, you know, rotate it and view it as if it's actually in front of you. So all of those images have math to them. They have a part number to them. They have mass, colors, tolerance levels. It's like it's a virtual representation of a rocket, of a car, of a train. It doesn't matter which. And then since all that is on the computer, you're able to use it across many platforms, from technical illustrators, from the design engineers, you name it. So you don't have to be at the factory. You can be clear across the country. You get on a network, they make the model available to you, and you're able to manipulate it, turn it, clean it, and eventually come up with this for a document.
Excellent. Thank you for diving a little deeper on that one. I appreciate that.
Well, you want to see any more end screen?
Yeah, let's look at a couple of different types.
Okay, let's see. Okay, so this is a different type of illustration. This is it's a technical drawing, but it's for assembly specifically. So this is a TCAS, traffic collision avoidance system. I urge everyone to look into those. This is a fascinating piece of equipment. It's designed for commercial use on aircrafts. Each aircraft has two, a pilot and co-pilot. Each of these systems has 4 redundancies. So if one fails, and it's a little mini computer, the information has to be agreed upon per panel, and there's 2 of them. So you have 8 redundancy systems. The approaching aircraft also has 2 more, and they're constantly communicating with each other via satellite, of course. And aircrafts are now decked, meaning distance height-wise between the 2 aircrafts to 1,000 feet. That's you know, onion skin distance when you're traveling at 350 knots, approaching each other. But the systems are so accurate that if for whatever reason you're close, you know, it'll tell one pilot descend, the other one ascend, in order to avoid collisions. You don't hear of aircrafts flying into each other, rarely, and it's partially due to this. So this drawing literally labels each and every single part down to the washer. So when you hear, you know, it's much safer to fly than to drive, it is absolutely correct, because an enormous amount of effort is taken into building these things. They're also severely tested. They're put on simulated flights. They freeze them, they heat them up, and to make sure that they work. And that's one of the industries I've been involved
Can
with.
you talk a little bit about the level of detail that's in this image and what's going on here with all of this information?
So that all this information is linked to a BOM, or bill of materials. So with it, each and every single part here has a number on it, and that number correlates to a part number on that list. If you've got a failure rate on this little LCD there, that you basically, the person who's working on this thing on a bench somewhere says, I need part number yada yada. So you basically refer to the parts list, which is what this is linked to. So it's
And are these kind of images hypertext linked as well, so that there's actual some functionality to them? They're not just numbered and then you have to go to a manual someplace else and look them up.
they
Can you
can be.
actually click on them and open them?
They can be. That's part of the bringing the acronym IETM, or Interactive Electronic Technical Manual. So I can take this image and hotspot everything that's on here, so that you don't have to go page through a book. You just click on it and it takes you. It's like a website. It's no different. And you can jump from here to another PDF, a Word document, an Excel spreadsheet, a model, you name it. So it's a complete interactive document, and that's.
Could you give some examples of other types of items that wouldn't be necessarily associated with the airplane?
For a refrigerator, if you buy a refrigerator and it's got a screen on it, it's a type of item. If you buy an iPhone wristwatch, that's a type of item. So where it started in the military sector, it's actually trickling in really quickly into the commercial side of life. And so we're seeing these things, we're using them, but we don't really know what they are or how they function. So folks like me are the content creators of how to get you to where you want to go quickly, because none of us want to wait anymore for anything. So, and it's just, time's money. So if I can get you to the part number that you need quickly, that means that much faster you can order it and get the tire changed on the airplane. And so
And in environments where content is complicated and there's lots of modular pieces that need to be weaved together, for example, in an assembly process to create a component, is it also now possible for these images to be linked to the component content management system, for example, that's managing all the words about the components, but now we're actually managing the image and the words together?
right. So one of the things I've worked on in creating iTems is even avoiding this level of work. If you have a design engineer that creates a model, a CAD model, be it Unigraphics, AutoCAD, CATIA, SolidWorks, it doesn't matter.
Are those software brands?
Yes, sir. So,
Okay.
meaning I can repurpose the CAD models themselves, because as you're creating this content, let's say a tire has part number, whatever it is, that's the holy grail, that part number. So that means that I don't necessarily have to create a line drawing, but rather repurpose what someone has already created and create an item where I can link to that part number and take me to the hydraulic line without even seeing. So that's the future here. That's
Sure.
where the military sector.
And I know the military and the government can be advanced in many ways, and also sometimes behind in technology, depending upon what we're talking about.
Right.
Is it also something that technical illustrators and content creators are working more closely now because of this relationship between the actual component, the drawing of the component, and the content about it? In other words, if the component changes, and that's it, one component of 1,000 changes, right, are the systems now designed to communicate to people like you, hey, the thing that you drew, the source material that it came from changed, you might want to go back and revisit this drawing to see if it needs to be updated.
Yes, sir. So there are up to now 6 levels of item or classes, class 1, 2, 3. The one I created was a class 3. There's higher. So now the higher classes are linked into networks. So if someone, I may be in Florida, someone in California does an update, basically they supersede that number. And we call that a pre and post mod situation. So the pre mod needs to remain in place because you may have an older train or maglev sitting out there somewhere, which is still being used. That's model A. But we've updated it to model D. So we now need to show both. But the moment that design engineer updates that component so that it now needs 6 screws versus 5, where that information gets automatically updated. And there's always going to be a little bit of tweaking that needs to be done, verification, make sure it does work and so forth, lag time, network issues and so forth. But yes, that does exist out there, and it's being perfected even more and more.
Sure. I think as we all learn lessons, these systems get smarter as we give them feedback, and the manufacturers are able to make improvements. So thank you for sharing those concepts. Could you show us a couple of other examples of something that a technical illustrator might create?
Let's see, jump over to this. I think we've discussed this one. This was part of that seat earlier that we talked about.
Yeah.
This is a technical illustration of different. This is just basically showing pointing to the basic components as to what they are and so forth. Here's an instruction. This is for children. It's a periscope. Again, showing a child how to build this periscope and how to fold this tab over this direction and so forth. Let's see.
Yeah, so you're right. There's different levels of complexity, and this one seems to be simplified as a way of trying to get the same information communicated to the child in this case.
Right, and if you notice, the lines are thicker. You've got color and so forth in order to get their attention. So that a technical illustrator communicates to a demographic group. So obviously, this is for children. This is not. So you have to keep that in mind, and who your audience is and so forth.
Got it.
Different type of illustration. This is now we're going into the pattern side of the house. And if you notice, there's shade lines on this, whereas in that one, there is none. So this is more bare bones. I just need to know what this button does and what it's called. Whereas this one, we still have labels on it. It's linked to a description, or rather lengthy description written by a patent attorney. But the United States Patent Office wants to see what kind of a surface this is. So that surface requires, shading. Is this? If you don't put the shading, then it's empty. We need to know it's the surface. And I would urge everyone to go to Google Patent and research some of the really old patent illustrations. We've simplified them quite a bit, but this is what you're seeing now is done electronically. The ones from like early 1900s, they were all done by hand.
Wow.
Which is
so let me just throw something in here. So it seems like you're highly dependent on information being fed to you by subject matter experts. And in the case of patent drawings, you may actually be working with attorneys, not necessarily only engineers.
Both. So sometimes, depending on the relationship, an attorney will just say, here's the inventor. We'll talk to I'll talk to the person, and they may not even have reference information. It's verbal. So I'll sit here and they'll describe to me, I've got a cylinder, and I'll draw a cylinder by hand, the best of my ability, listening and it literally like shorthand drawing what it is that they require. Then when I'm finished with it, I'll scan it, send it to them. Is this what you mean? ? Yes, but this cylinder or protrusion needs to be longer, 5 inches versus 20. And, you know, we'll go back and forth until that person says, that's it. That's what I need. Okay. So at that point, you know, we need to show from a patent illustration point of view, you need to show an isometric view, you know, front, back, bottom, top, left and right views. And those are USPTO requirements, because an examiner who's going to be looking at this in a couple of years needs to understand what it is that the inventor is trying to convey. And my job is to make sure that I present that information clearly. And so there's the challenge, depending on proportions, depending on, you know, how big of an item is. If you invented, you know, a brand new type of bottle cap versus a time machine, for example, and you've got you know, 8.5 by 11 sheet to work with, and you want to shove as much as you can in there. You can't put too much, because then it gets all gummed up, and you can't understand what you're seeing. So
Excellent. Probably time for another example if you've got one more in there.
I do. So let me, if I may, I'm going to jump into my invention, which as a technical illustrator, you unavoidably become a design engineer yourself, because as you're taking things apart, you think of ways to improve it, you know, how to reach something. So this is something I came up with, which is now has a patent pending number on it. This is a wind slash solar slash weather station, you know, electric generator for your home and residential. So this is one of a patent drawing that I created for myself of the unit. That's one of the views, but I can actually, let me end the
yeah, please. Can you show us a physical manifestation of that?
Yeah, I can. Let me.
Oh, that's great.
And for that, I now have
Flip you over here.
a 3D printed scaled model of the thing. So I created this thing on CAD, on AutoCAD actually. It's a solid model, which I eventually grabbed, and I bought a 3D printer, a CR10 printer that's got a 12x by 12y and 12 inches, I'm sorry, plate, and 16 inches high. So something like this would be printed in parts. So if you can tell how rough it is in the exterior, and this is even 2 parts right here, comes apart. So
wow,
right? So you print the pieces and you start fitting them, you know, together. There you go, right there. And it's a way of producing. So 3D printing is a fascinating field I got involved with. It's a great way for someone like me who's, you know, I designed engineered this thing, to be able to take, you know, something that I drew by pencil, with a pencil, do a CAD model of it, check for tolerances, and eventually do an STL or a stereolithic stereolithic file, put it into a CNC machine, which is really what a 3D printer is of sorts, because it's got X, Y, Z coordinates that you can edit and so forth, and make a wall thicker, you know, thinner, longer, and so forth.
Do you feel like this is a big for the future, and not just for patent ideas, but for practical things? Like I heard of somebody who was frustrated that they lost a chess set piece, for an inexpensive chess set, not a collector's item or anything, just some plastic chess set. And they were like, where the hell is the pawn? We're missing a pawn. And they went to the website for the vendor, and they were able to download a 3D printable pawn, pay a couple bucks to get the design, and then they printed their own. Do you feel like this is the future? This is where we're going?
So you mentioned chess. I love chess. I've been playing chess since I was a child. One of my brothers taught me, and I actually have a chess set that I, you know, have little pieces I've had for a while, but I wanted to make them taller. So I designed a base for it and so on and so forth. So I 3D printed myself amendments, I guess I should say, to the little pieces, so they're much taller. So basically, it's an open field as to what you can do with 3D printing. Mind you, there's a learning curve to this. This is not a plug and play. You've got to learn about thermodynamics. What type of plastics are you using? For example, this is completely constructed from corn-based material. I can eat this; it won't hurt me. So, and this is just for proof of concept. If I may go back to this, so I now have a patent pending number on it, and so this is a vertical turbine. If you can, see the blades turn. So the solar panels are on the outside. In case of severe storm, this thing will close. So waits, for the storm to pass, and then when after it's done, it opens back up and resumes work. So again, being a technical illustrator, being a patent illustrator, has given me a hell of an education into industries, how things work, how things don't work. So this is design number 4 of everything that I learned that did not work. So engineering is about what doesn't work, really, not.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I think you learn a lot from technical communication in general. And technical illustration, I think, is another level of detail, right? Where you're getting down to the nitty gritty to discover how everything actually works.
Communication in technical illustration I took a writing composition class years ago, and the Mr. Marimba, and I remember his name, actually, it's amazing, but he basically gave us an assignment on how to instruct someone who's never had shoes or seen shoelaces, how to tie their shoes, and the instructions are to be sent to the other side of the planet. So thinking about it, and I got an A on the class, thank God, but thinking about it, before I send you instructions, you and I have got to agree on what is up, down, my right, left, forward, and back. So I can send you instructions and say, well, take this thing, go over. Well, what does over mean? Over what? So you and I have got to decide on an alphabet. We've got to decide on jargon. I mean, what it means to go up. So before I can even write a set of instructions, and that falls under the heading of cultural meanings. I mean, there's people on the planet who whistle to each other. I don't know if you've seen that documentary, but that's fascinating, and it's always looking for ways to improve how to communicate with each other effectively. I mean, it's a very difficult thing to do. And when you remove words out of it, like what we're doing now, and we're just left with pictures, in some ways it's easier, in some ways it's harder. So my purpose is how do I grab this and illustrate it in such a form that I can give it to a 6-year-old and say, build it. And if I can effectively do that, then we're there.
That's a very lofty goal, and I think it's an important reduction in ambiguity is what I heard you saying in there too. That's critical. That you have to have some agreed upon standards. Speaking of standards, we've asked people to ask a bunch of questions, and there's some questions about standards and some other things too. Why don't we tackle a few of those? I'll ask you a few as rapid fire as we can. We'll take a little commercial break where I'll tell the audience about our sponsor, and then we'll take any other questions that we can. The first question was, let's see. This is just a comment. Ed is a fascinating person with many talents. So you've got an audience fan member there. As a technical communicator who both writes the instructions and illustrates the content that goes with it, I'm always interested in learning new ways to present the best content to the user. I'm very interested in seeing more examples of how he presents illustrations, call outs, etc. Any chance you could show any of those?
Other than what I've shown right now, different industries like different things. I mean, and that falls under style guides. For example, BAE, where I was, does it one particular way. Lockheed Martin does it a particular way. Honeywell does it in a particular way. So I've seen just a bare line with a number on it. I've seen places where they want to, some kind of a line that swings. I mean, like
Yeah.
patent illustration. They don't want straight lines because we don't want to compete with the content. That makes logical sense if you think about it. There are times when you use a triangle, and then the number in the middle that signifies, extra attention or danger. Be careful. I've seen lines where you've got literally the proverbial, line
Don't do
through it.
it.
Don't use it. But really, I have not seen much more than that, simply because that horse has been beaten to death. And I mean, I suggested changing a color at one time, which was well received. Typically, we like to just stay with just black. Worst comes to shove, we might show gray, and we'll all have a party over that. But it's about bare bones information. I mean, there's logical information, and how do we get even more logical on that? So there aren't too many choices that haven't been picked at, because there's a lot of us that have created this.
Yes. And speaking of the skills and the logic, it seems like you're not just in command of artistic skills, like the understanding of perspective or color design or balance or anything artsy. You also have to know about science-oriented things like information science. How much of a role is taxonomy and metadata playing in the modern technical illustrators discipline?
Well, okay, so again, this is something you have to love to do. When I get involved with a project, it's like it's Christmas Day for me. I'm the 8-year-old with the box, and I get to open this up, because then I spend a lot of time on the internet. We've got a lot of books and so forth. So I'll do a lot of research. And the more you learn, the better you're able to prepare what's behind the scene. I think I mentioned earlier, a lot of people see a drawing as a drawing. It's just a line work. To folks in my field, the drawing is just what you see. Everything that supports it in the background is the juicy stuff. For example, you're an illustrator, and you now received an illustration done by someone else 7 years ago. Through the metadata, you're able to then pick out what that person was thinking or how they constructed that. So that's a fascinating field. You're a programmer, and you're delving into someone else's code. So that's just like, I love steak. It's like having a steak, a really well-made, juicy sucker, because you end up re-engineering what someone else may have done. And every once in a while, I come across one that go, whoever did this, smart cookie, because
one of our viewers wants to know, what kind of tools do you use to create technical illustrations?
You've got everything from Adobe Illustrator. People use Corel, AutoCAD. One of my personal favorites is IsoDraw, which has a CGM native drawing capability. It's incredible. Computer graphics metadata. So that's a software. And actually, I met the designer of IsoDraw when it was called Aitido Software. Long time ago in Atlanta, he was just rolling out a CAD process application, which was good, expensive, but good. And so those are some of the ones, but you can use really just about any CAD software or even desktop publishing to create an illustration.
Software questions are hard because they're very specific to the organization that's using them, right? But from your perspective, do you, in the jobs that you've worked in previously as a technical illustrator, one of our viewers would like to know, is there a particular software package that you use to create service manuals? Not that you would recommend it, but is that something is there a popular one that you use in the industries that you serve?
So the main dish on that will be IsoDraw. I have probably 25 years under my belt on ISODraw.
And you
Uh,
say ISO and then draw, like
Correct.
International Standards Organization draw.
Go to PTC Arbortext and type in ISODraw, and you'll learn all about it.
Got it.
It's a very unique piece of software because it's sort of a CAD slash desktop application.
Little hybrid application. Okay.
Exactly. So in uh, uh, um, in CGM native, all that means that you create content in CGM files, which typically people export to. So
Okay.
Dieter, smart guy, created that ability, which he was very, thoughtful on that. Which means you finish your drawing and you're already done with what you need to. So CGMs are used within web applications, items, and they're just there's a web CGM consortium that I used to be a part of, and they're worldwide. This is a conglomeration of companies worldwide that get together every once in a while and agree on how do we show content.
Can we segue for just a second, because I think we're running out of time. We've got tons of audience questions coming in right now. One of them says this is about standards. Are there standards that control the style of drawings, like colors, shapes, arrows, and what are they used for? How do we find them, etc.?
Absolutely. So back to style guides. So if you go to BAE Systems, they've got a manual of style guides. Thou shalt use this line. Thou shalt use this font. You can only be X. So you've got to basically memorize that. There is cross references between one company and another. But that's one of the first things you ask for. Show me the style guides. That's your canon law as far as creating drawings. Some places want the text to be 0.125. Some folks will want a drawing number on their drawing. So first things you do is you ask for a style guide and memorize that. Memorize it.
And what about technical illustrations in according to a style guide? Are they governed by things like S1000D? Are there content standards that you need to be prepared to kind of interact and meld with when you create illustrations?
And the word for that is absolutely. I mean, absolutely. I mean, that goes back to the world consortium of manufacturers. When we create, if we build a refrigerator here and it goes over to the other side of the planet, if they need to edit it over the and I've worked with people in other industries who have actually flown their folks over to me so we can sit together and say, this is why we do this, and provided them templates and provided them font styles and things of that nature so that we have an agreement. It's absolutely necessary in order to be able to communicate. So yes.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Here's a slightly different kind of question. As an author, they say, I work with a team that embellishes my script and reworks my PowerPoint slides into animations. Do you have any recommendations for books that might help me understand how to work with graphic artists and people creating imagery?
Not offhand. That's a tough question because every industry is different. So sounds like the question comes more from the graphics design side of the house, and that's a tough one because that fluctuates quite a bit more. Whereas the world that I'm in, it's very rigid, can be very rigid because we all have to have an agreement on how this needs to be depicted. While if I'm understanding the question, graphics design kind of ebbs and flows a little bit more with marketing and things of that nature. So I'm sorry, I don't
seems like a creative question, but that's okay. You're not supposed to know the answer to every question.
Yeah.
But here's another one for you. Have you ever collaborated on a video or augmented reality project that allowed you to kind of create repair and maintenance content that way?
It's a direction that I was pushing for. This is within the government and so forth. Nothing I can share, unfortunately. but yes, that's a direction that we're being pushed. To me, for now, items are just about as best as information we can relay, whereas the augmented reality, where you wear goggles and things of that nature, that's still growing, and it requires so much memory that things don't always work easily, and that's typically what happens. So the simpler the better in conveying information. I've seen some really good examples, but then again, everything has to be working just so. So from a design engineer point of view, you want to keep it as simple as possible and convey the necessary information. It's not always good to get too fancy. It looks pretty, looks nice. It's like you're in there reaching around the hydraulic line and so forth. But and I've asked this question before, and I've gotten a dirty look. Do we need that? Do I need to spend the money on doing that if I can, draw a stick on my paper, scan it, put a label on it, and here it is. And by the way, I can show you the other side of it on a separate drawing. So I'm not dismissing it. I'm just saying that what's the requirement, and how pretty do I have to make it?
Sounds like there's a time and place for everything.
Correct.
Here's another question. Are there times in which you consider using a phrase, so I guess they're saying appending a drawing with a phrase, such as, this image may not reflect the actual product, and showing illustrations that might not be exactly as the product is because there are just too many customer-specific specifications or configurations to document, I guess.
Right.
So is it possible that you sometimes label the image that it's telling the audience that it's the best it can be, but it may not be to scale, or there may be some other difference?
From a technical perspective, that's rare. I don't like to use it because what's the point of what I'm doing? I'm talking to that. I'm not insulting maintainers. I'm creating a drawing to help a 6-year-old how to build this thing. So so most I've done is image not shown for clarity.
Yeah.
Image not shown for clarity.
It seems like this page left intentionally blank. Maybe not as useful as we need it to be, but I understand why they.
But if you're doing a drawing, show the drawing. Help the guy at the end of the line. That's the person you're trying to communicate with your pictures.
One of our viewers is curious about the patent office and wondered if you knew if the U.S. Patent Office required you to make item content or not.
I have not heard of it yet. I seriously doubt it because it's the government.
Well, yeah, there you have it right there.
Let me give you this example. For example, I can create a CAD drawing, a model with all the math and all the vectors and everything else. Do the drawing, send it to the patent attorney. They approve it and everything else. It goes to the U.S. Patent Office, and you know what they do with it? They scan it to 300 DPI.
Well, yeah, there you go. If you knew that, you wouldn't invest all that time in that.
So now we're going from vector lines to pixels, and okay, they could have a vector PDF, but they don't. They scan it to 100 DPI.
Yeah, that made me chuckle because it seems like something a government might do. Have you ever illustrated a line drawing that is added animation to something?
Yes, I have. Nothing I can show, unfortunately, because it's classified stuff.
Okay.
But yeah, a little portion of it. I created an item in PDF. And basically you click on a part and then the little animation plays at one point. And that's just to show it was really an experiment, and it works well, and so forth. But yes, the answer is you can do that.
As a technical illustrator, are you ever asked to write related content? If not, is that written part done before or after you do the illustration?
It's done in conjunction. But then again, it depends on the item and how it's designed. I've done technical writing. I don't like to do it. That's a different function of the brain. I like the tearing apart and illustrating side. But as a technical illustrator, you can't help but write about it in your head because you got to take off A before you can reach D and so forth. So while the technical writer takes the lead in doing a document, what happens is that lead gets transferred over to the technical illustrator if the technical illustrator finds that this doesn't quite work because the CAD model that you're showing, in order for me to get to the part back here, I've got to reach in much further than the wrench will let. But in this view, it shows like it's right there, but it isn't. So I got to go back to the writer and the engineer and say, sorry, pal, I need a 10-foot pole taped to the end of my wrench so I can, take this apart. And that won't work. I know you guys didn't think about it, but I have the model, I'm rotating it.
I think it's the same thing tech writers encounter when they're editing and they're proofreading and they're actually going along with the product and they're like, wait a minute, there's a better way to say this. And then they go back to the subject matter expert and have a little negotiation, right? It might be an improvement that they take your idea on and maybe not. Is that what you're saying?
Right. So there's a lot of pressure when you're building a document. There's always the deadline. So it's a matter of maybe not looking at it as detailed as possible. And so it kind of, falls on the illustrator to once you're taking things apart, I mean, and you're in it, you took the washer off and now it's behind you and you're looking at it and so forth, to relay the fact that, I'm sorry, this writing is not going to work properly. You've got to redo this.
Well, we've still got a few more minutes left, but I'm going to encourage the audience members, in case you'd like to ask Ed a question, you've got a couple seconds that you can submit one here. Click the Ask a Question button located underneath your webinar viewing panel. You can type in a question. We'll ask as many as possible with the time remaining. But before we do that, I want to tell you a little bit about the sponsor of today's show. Our program is called the Content Advantage, and it is a twice monthly show that's brought to you by Zoom In Software. For those of you who are unaware, Zoom In Software transforms technical product content into dynamic and intuitive experiences so people can find the answers that they need in order to use your product or service. Zoom In produces a cloud-based solution that allows you to streamline content operations and gain powerful analytics, something everybody needs, so you can refine your content strategy and improve your customer service. If you'd like to learn more about Zoom In Software, you can do one of two things. You can point your web browser to zoominsoftware.com, or you can click on the attachments button located underneath your webinar viewing panel to access a direct link to the Zoom In Software website and also some additional white papers and case studies that are available on their website. They've got some great content there. So if you're concerned about delivering the right piece of information to the right person at the right time in the right format and language, check out Zoom In Software's delivery platform. They'll help you be able to do just that. Okay, Ed, now that I've done with my commercial responsibility, let me ask you a couple more questions. Yes. Let's see. I noticed that you manage text and some illustrations. Have you ever had to manage text that was illustrated and translated?
Yes. Rare. A long time ago. Hasn't come up anymore, but yes, absolutely. And of course, with that, a lot of verification to make sure that we're conveying the proper information, across cultures.
And when you say rare, it wasn't that the language was rare. I think what you're saying is that in your particular jobs that you were working with the government, the primary language was English for the most part, and there wasn't a business need to convert that into other languages.
Correct. And the language that we use within the government is basically what you call simplified English. So you don't use text like doesn't or isn't, is not, does not, and so forth.
So we're looking for internationalizing the language, making it easier for everyone who can have a little mastery of English to understand.
Correct.
In the government's case. In the case where you used translated text, are there issues about managing the labels and the text in the images that should be considered before you create a giant hairball of a mess of multilingual content?
Well, and here's an approach that I've done in the past. So particularly like in ISODRAW, there is functionality where you can put a text, a label and so forth, and then add what you call an ID or a text balloon or something like, so that when you hover over it, it actually can say something else. So that's an added benefit as to how to convey or clarify one thing means versus, in this language or another. So I would definitely recommend, and I don't want to recommend anything, but it's not a paid thing. But that's a functionality that they have. Others may have that. I don't know.
As an illustrator, do you do anything special to learn about the audience for your work? And I'd like you to answer this question, and I got a little bit more to ask you. In response, under the perfect scenario, not necessarily your last job. So as an illustrator, for example, if you were creating an assembly drawing, would you go on site in a perfect world and interview the technicians that do that kind of assembly? And if so, where's the value there?
And it's an excellent question. Yes, you need to know the demographics that you're addressing. Most people in the field that I've been involved in are highly skilled SMEs or subject matter experts, people who've been maintainers, mechanics in the commercial world, maintainers in the military side. But these folks have been around taking things apart forever, and they're experts themselves. So when you're addressing that, you're aware of the fact. I mean, and rarely does it come up where we have a miscommunication, simply because as long as I've been doing this, it's kind of I've crossed that bridge a long time ago. But it always, when in doubt, ask. The only dumb question is the question you don't ask.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Can you help a newbie real quick before we sign off that wants to know what's the biggest mistake somebody new to technical illustration might want to avoid?
Okay, so think logically. A lot of folks who get involved in technical illustration might have been graphic designers at first, and that's an entirely different world. I was a graphic designer for a long time until someone, dear friend of mine still, gave me the opportunity to draw a heart pacer lead by hand. And we went from color and all of the arrangements of all that to black. And it was just, I need the product, and bare bones, what is it? So think logically. If you're on a deserted island and this manual floated to the beach where you're at, do you want to see a lot of colors, or do you want instructions 1, 2, 3 as to how to start a fire? So think that way. Think pragmatic. Think black and white, bare bones information. What do I need now? I'm on my spaceship. I've got a leak. How do I use this gun with the glue to put it on there and plug up the hole? Without the colors, with all that bunch of stuff. Period.
Excellent. That was a lot. Thank you, Ed. You got record number of questions today, and I apologize to the audience members. There's still half a dozen questions that we left unanswered. Some of them were relatively similar to questions that we answered before.
You can forward them to me if you want. That's not an issue.
We'll forward them to you as well. But before we do that, I want to thank you for joining us, Ed. Thanks for sharing all of your expertise. I know that you are passionate about this subject, and I really appreciate you doing so today.
And you got to love doing this. You got to love tearing things apart and see how they work. I finally figured out
the word you used was tinkerer.
Yes. And I used to get yelled at as a child for this, but I make a living from it now.
I was going to say I've shared similar discussions with my parents who found report cards from 5th grade that says Scott always wants to be on the stage and thinks he should have the microphone. And look, here I am.
Yeah.
Microphone. So I tell you what, Ed, thanks for being here and being on our show today. I'm going to close out the show and tell the audience a few things before we go. So thank you for joining us. You've been watching Let's Talk Technical Illustration with Ed Perez as our special guest. And I want to tell you that I want you to keep your mailbox open for the next 2 weeks. We're going to be having a show every 2 weeks this year. The Content Advantage show, February the 8th. I'm going to interview Alyssa Fox, the Vice President of Channel Marketing for cybersecurity provider Alert Logic. We're going to discuss the connection between technical communication and marketing, which she knows because she's got deep experience in both disciplines. I think you're going to be super excited to hear about that. And for those of you who love metadata and taxonomy, we also will have February the 22nd. John Horodisky will come. He's got a brand new book on